With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today. Simply go to tntradio.live. Critically analyzing global affairs, the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. Here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most pressing and controversial news issues of our time. Our mission is to provide more light and less heat in our unwavering quest to uncover the truth. We aim to inform, educate, and entertain, but with dignity and respect. And it's vital that we don't just ask the questions, but question the answers, which a lot of media outlets are not currently doing. Today, we're going to have a look at the unrest which is now happening here in the United Kingdom, which is not so united after all, and also look at the military build-up and war danger in the Middle East. And I'm delighted to welcome back to the Muckrakers Martin J. and Dr. George Szamuely. How are you, gentlemen?
Very good, Andrew.
It's good to see you. Let me tell you, because it helps plug their stuff, which is all part of the deal. So Martin Jay is an award-winning journalist and editor of margrebi.org. Do check it out. And levantis.me, one of stories we're going to be looking at a little bit later. His career has spanned over 30 years, which has seen him work in over 50 countries for a host of big media titles. But my favourite bit is always that on his Twitter page, X, he proudly proclaims that he's been fired by all the media giants, and CNN called him a good journalist, but a pain in the backside. Dr. George Szamuely, he's the intellectual amongst us. He's a senior research fellow at the Global Policy Institute, London. He's written for innumerable publications and author of a brilliant book called Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. If you haven't got your copy, order it straight after this show. So let's have a look at what's happening at the moment. It's all over the news. There's a Cobra meeting happening at the moment. Here in the United Kingdom, we are anything but united. It's a nation gripped by chaos. The streets are ablaze with unrest. There's been nearly 150 arrests, which mark a weekend of violence and disorder that has left a country on edge. Across England and Northern Ireland, towns and cities have become battlegrounds, horrendous imagery, and mobs have clashed with police, leaving dozens of officers injured. There was unrest in Manchester, in Hull, in Liverpool, Bristol, Stoke-on-Trent, Blackpool, Rotherham, Middlesbrough and Belfast, and missiles have been thrown and shops have been looted. I want to get your take on this, both gentlemen, because George, you're in Budapest, and Martin, you're in Marrakesh. To what extent is this being reported where you are? Let's start with you, George.
Well, it isn't really reported that extensively, but the immigration issue is obviously highly salient in Hungary. And of course, Hungary has been one of the leaders of the anti-mass migration movement, particularly in Europe. But I did live for many years in the United Kingdom, and I do remember that the immigration issue has been a huge issue for decades. Enoch Powell raised the whole issue famously in April 1968 when he made his Rivers of Blood speech, and ever since then it has been a huge issue. At the time that Powell spoke, of course, the immigration was not, in any sense as huge as it is now. And the problem then was legal immigration. There were, the whole way of family reunion coming from the Indian subcontinent and so on. But now, of course, there's an enormous problem through illegal immigration, large number of illegal immigrants. And of course, there is the whole abuse of the asylum process. So Keir Starmer, who in the campaign, because he already knew that this immigration was a big issue. It was a big issue for the Tories. It helped the Tories win election after election. And the massive rejection of the Tories in the July the 4th election was due to the fact that they hadn't done anything about immigration. They promised and promised and promised, and they hadn't done anything, and they lost their core support. Boom, it just collapsed. It went off to the reform, or they just sat on their hands. But that was the reason for the Labour landslide. It wasn't anything but to do with Keir Starmer. It was just that the Tory vote had collapsed, and in large part, it had collapsed through immigration. Brexit took place because of immigration. That was the overwhelming issue that propelled the British voters. Starmer had nothing to say on this. I mean, he kind of said, well, we're going to have a more humane approach, and then, we're going to scrap the Rwanda policy, which probably was misconceived. But he clearly indicated to the public that he intended to be a lot more lax than the Tories, who had already been punished for being too lax. And that helped trigger this rage that took place following the murder of those 3 little girls. Because that was, the alleged culprit was a second-generation immigrant from Rwanda. And again, people then question why exactly are people from Rwanda living in the UK? And you can't even claim that this was a former colony of Great Britain. Then there was some sort of a bond uniting Rwanda and Great Britain. This was part of the policy of encouraging mass immigration, particularly by the Tony Blair government. So this is what triggered it. And the response of the Starmer government is a familiar response, which goes, crackdown, crackdown, crackdown. We're going to shove you in prison. We're going to charge you. We're going to, we're going to prevent you from getting on trains. We're going to use face recognition technology. If you just use the online social media to encourage riots, we're going to get you. This is absolutely the worst thing that you can do. And I think if Starmer was planning on a honeymoon, I think his premiership is already in very, very serious trouble.
You make some excellent points. Martin?
I was going to make exactly that point. I think I do wonder how many days he's got. He also has just brushed aside this subject, and he's been in office now exactly 1 month. And I think these disenfranchised, poor white communities made a very distinct gesture in 2016. They voted for Brexit in a referendum, and the message was very, very clear. For other people living around the UK, the Brexit meant 2 or 3 things. But for these people, it only really meant one thing. It was about immigration. And they said the message was do something about immigration, do something now. The Tories didn't do anything at all. And so I think there's 1 month in office for the Labour Party, for Keir Starmer. Why do I keep calling him Steer Karma? Maybe that's the new name I've invented for him. What can we expect from him in 1 month? He's done absolutely nothing. And I think this was inevitable. It was inevitable that when this poor girl was murdered and social media spread the lies that it was a Muslim who did it, turns out it wasn't. George says there's no pretext whatsoever to even link it to colonialism. But in fact, he's wrong. When the end of the First World War, Britain actually took Rwanda from the Germans. And we held it for a short while before our royal family before Queen Victoria gave it to the Belgians as a present. So actually there is a sort of colonial history with Rwanda and Burundi. It's one of the countries I've worked in. I have a sort of special fond memories of Rwanda. But going back to what we're looking at now, the Elon Musk comment about civil war, I think that's probably exaggerated, but I think we are now dangerously skirting very close to a state of emergency in many of these cities in the north of England. And if this prime minister doesn't get his skates on, if he doesn't do something very, very quickly, he's going to have to bring in the army to create, to hold some sort of, a law and order together and to stop the looting. But I think the whole issue also, it throws a spotlight on a broken country, a real dire lack of governance. But it also, I think, puts the police under the spotlight as well. I mean, if you look at just the last 10 or 15 years, what's happened to our police force in Britain, it's gone from being, old-fashioned policemen who basically keep law and order and get into very nasty scraps with people in riots when things turn nasty and help, basically help the country run. Now, policemen in the UK are somehow social workers in uniforms. They've got these funny dances which they learn to do. And it's very difficult to take them seriously. And I think people actually don't take them seriously anymore. And this is part of the violence against the police that we've seen, is that it's not just a failed, Britain's becoming a failed state. And this immigration policy, which is a total failure, is also accompanied hand in hand by really, really poor policing. There was in one of these cities, I think it was Rotherham, I'm sure someone will correct me, there was a Holiday Inn, which was They tried to burn it down. The protesters tried to burn it down. It's very difficult to distinguish between just regular, simple white people who are angry, and then amongst them far-right activists, because this is what's happening, is that there's the far-right groups who've actually taken advantage of this situation and taken it to the next level. But they tried to burn Holiday Inn down. I don't think they succeeded. But if you look at the video clip, you see just 15 or 20 meters to the right of this fire started, a line of police officers just standing there doing absolutely nothing, just spectators really to it. So I think we've got a real problem in Britain. And I think this may well end up spreading. We might see this trend popping up across the European continent in the next couple of days, and even in as far as Australia, even possibly, because immigration now is reaching boiling point. We're really at 100 degrees now, and what's that expression? Something's got to give.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, having a look, and all the British papers, there we go. It's all on that sort of basis. Shame on you, says the Metro, and lots of them are leading on that sort of side. And as George mentioned, it all goes back to a horrific incident in Southport last Tuesday, where it was a knife attack on a Taylor Swift themed holiday club. And what it was, it claimed the life of 3 young girls. It was a false report. It was misinformation put out by a channel called Channel 3 Now, which has only got a few thousand, low thousand followers, where they sort of talked about it being to do with somebody who came over here illegally and to do with Islam, and it was all completely false. And they issued an apology, and we've tried to get them. I've asked Jeremy to get them on the show so they can explain themselves, because they were trying basically to say this. The media said, it's Russian influence and so on and so forth. And they put out a response saying, our response on the misleading information published in a recent article on our website, Channel 3 Now, we deeply regret any confusion or inconvenience this may cause. It's still up there. They're still running. They still only got a handful of followers, and they're only following about 22, of which they seem to be American police forces. But it does raise the question about the spread of misinformation. And while we've got that sort of powder keg, if you like, of anger and chaos, people are looking for an excuse to basically riot. Because what looting has got to do, what going into shops and taking a new television set has got to do with the murder of 3 little girls, beggars belief. What's your take on that, George?
Well, I think that we can overstate the issue of the spread of misinformation. Initially, yes, that was the report, that this was the culprit was a Muslim who was in the country illegally, or he was seeking asylum. But that misinformation was corrected almost immediately. I mean, I was following the news on that night. I think it was a Monday night. And, I remember in the evening, it had already been corrected. So, everything that's happened since Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's already happening after the initial story had been corrected. And I think that the fact that this person was a second-generation immigrant from Rwanda doesn't really make the story any better, because ultimately the issue with immigration is always, well, does the host country benefit from bringing in migrants? That's the only issue that matters. Do we benefit? Now, if you bring somebody in and the result is that his son, the second generation, because remember, the second generation immigrants often have very different attitudes to the first generation, where the first generation may be eager to adapt and to live a law-abiding life. A second generation doesn't feel any of that obligation and often has many resentments that express themselves in all kinds of violent ways. So then the question is, well, why was this person from Rwanda in the country? Well, it was part of the policy of the Tony Blair government to make Britain multicultural, to make Britain diverse. I mean, that was an explicit policy. I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's something that they said themselves. There was an article published in 2009 by Andrew Nether in the Evening Standard, he was a speechwriter and an advisor to Tony Blair. And he said in this article that the goal of bringing in the migrants had been to rub the right's nose in diversity. That's his exact words, to rub the right's nose in diversity. They kind of didn't want to say this explicitly because that would upset their own working class constituency, because their working class constituency really was not at all happy with Blair's policy of bringing in migrants. And so they talked about the economic benefits. Oh, well, growth in GDP, the country will be so much better, and so on. But we can't see the economic benefits. What economic benefits has Britain enjoyed since this policy? I mean, this alleged killer's father was a taxi driver. So why exactly is Britain bringing in somebody who's a taxi driver? Is taxi driving another one of those jobs that Britons aren't prepared to do? I mean, that's always this nonsensical story. Well, we have to, because these are jobs people aren't prepared to do. They're not prepared to be taxi drivers? I never heard that. So the question then is, this anger that's just boiling over, it's about the entirety of this immigration policy. It goes going back to Blair and then going back, decades and decades earlier. And so therefore, just simply trying to cling on to this thing, oh, well, the initial story was wrong. Yeah, the initial story was wrong, but that doesn't make the basic story right.
Yeah, no, again, some very interesting points. We're going to have a look at Sir Keir Starmer's response and also look at the escalating situation in the Middle East after these messages.
Sometimes life can be overwhelming, and suicide may seem like the only way to relieve the pain. Beyond Now is an evidence-based app created by Beyond Blue to help you cope when suicidal thoughts start to appear. You can use it to create an easy-to-follow plan that is personal to you and includes steps like know your warning signs so you can act early, make your environment safe by removing harmful items, activities you can do or people you can be with to distract yourself from suicidal thoughts, reminders of things that make you feel strong. Some of these steps might be tough to fill out, and that's okay. It can be helpful to make or share your safety plan with a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional. You might feel like you're alone, but help is available. If you're worried you can't stay safe, use the red telephone icon to call your emergency contacts. Download the free Beyond Now app today to create your personal safety plan.
A better business tip from TNT Radio. The benefits of advertising on today's news talk, TNT Radio, should be clear to businesses of any shape or size. It can be accessed anywhere, anytime, by anybody, and is the perfect way to build brand awareness and stimulate digital activity. If you'd like more information about advertising on TNT Radio, simply fill out your details on our contact page and we'll be in touch. To find out more, go to tntradio.live.
Critically analyzing global affairs. The Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. I'm joined today by Dr. George Szamuely and also Martin J. And we're looking at the United Kingdom being not so united, in fact, in chaos. And as we speak, Sir Keir Starmer is holding a COBRA meeting, which is the Cabinet Office Briefing Room A is what it stands for, nothing to do with a snake. So we can have a look at that sort of side. And what he's promised, and lots of rhetoric, he's been out on the trail, if you like, say the rioters will regret their far-right thuggery, is what he's labelled it, and they will face the full force of the law. What's your take on that, Martin?
Nonsense. I mean, I think it's very easy just to write this off as far-right thuggery. The government are quite deluded about what the root cause of all this is, and it's very, very easy to blame far-right wing or to blame social media. We've had a lot of that from the government in the last couple of days. In 2005, we had riots in Birmingham that was blamed on pirate radio. Now we have riots again, and it's blamed on the media or social media again, and doesn't seem to be any clarity, any real lucid, joined up thinking from the government on this. I mean, this morning, just to add a point to what George says, I think it's absolutely true that the premise of linking this whole thing to the color of the skin of the person who did these horrific crimes is it's interesting in that if it were a Muslim who did that, can you imagine what we'd be looking at today, with social media primed, ready to just explode. All of these sites ready to just fill the airwaves with all that. But from the government's point of view, because I know you want to talk about the government, I'm not sure about the Prime Minister really saving this. To give you an indication of just how out of their depth they are, this morning, I think LBC did an interview with Yvette Cooper. I saw a